Hello, I'm Matt Teal and welcome to the Military Tech Show. Today I'm at RAF Brize Norton in Oxfordshire, where the weather is ever so slightly changeable, and I've been given exclusive behind-the-scenes access to the RAF's groundbreaking multi-role refueler and transporter, the Voyager. Coming up on the show, we get hands-on in the flight deck with the pilot and mission systems operator. Nothing left to chance, we're with the engineers and specialists who have to deliver the highest standard of safety and maintenance. And it's not your average station forecourt. We take to the skies with the Voyager as a squadron of Royal Air Force fighter jets queue up to refuel. So you need an aircraft that can transport 300 troops 6,000 miles and has the capability to refuel other aircraft air-to-air. Step forward, the Voyager. It's the biggest aircraft the RAF operates, and it might look familiar. It's pretty much an Airbus A330, the sort of plane that you or I might go on our holidays in. But on this very special edition of the Military Tech Show, we'll show you all the cutting-edge tech that makes this variation so special. And I'm going on a mission to refuel a squadron of Typhoon fighter jets. Replacing the old VC-10, the Voyager delivers a new and flexible capability to the Royal Air Force for its military and humanitarian operations. The consortium air tanker, in partnership with the Ministry of Defence and the RAF, was chosen to deliver and maintain the new fleet. 8 Voyagers are currently in service with 10 and 101 squadrons. Each one carries 111 tonnes of fuel, providing air-to-air refuelling through its underwing pods. On board, there's capacity for 291 passengers with a payload of 43 tonnes of freight. It can also be set up to provide space for 40 stretchers in a casualty evacuation. Well, this makes it the only aircraft certified to perform 3 different types of missions simultaneously: air-to-air refuelling, passenger and freight transport, and medical evacuation. As you would expect, there is an awful amount of science and technology behind the workings of the Voyager, but it's still only as good as the guys who sit up there, the crew. And particularly in a refuelling mission, the 2 key players are the pilot and the mission systems operator. So this is where it gets really interesting, and I've been invited onto the flight deck of the Voyager to find out a bit more about it. Gav.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for letting me on board.
Nice, a pleasure.
And up front, I was going to say this is the business end, of course, but I guess a lot of stuff happens outside by nature of the refuelling. But let's deal with this first of all.
Yeah, sure.
Tell me a bit about the airframe.
So what you're looking at is it's a 4th generation aircraft. It's one of our most modern aircraft in the fleet. It's the biggest aircraft we've got in the Air Force at the moment in terms of wingspan and size. It's primarily, when you look at it and you come on board, it's an A330, an Airbus A330, but we've added to it. So in terms of comparing to a VC-10, which was very much a 1960s aircraft, this aircraft comes with all sorts of extras, which give the crew extra capacity. The automatics are very, very good, very reliable. The engines are more reliable. Instead of 4 engines, we've got 2 engines now. So not only are they more powerful, they're more fuel efficient, they're quieter, they're more reliable, so we only needed 2. So we've made room on the wings of what would be an A340 to take an A330 with the 2 engines, not 4, and put some refuelling pods on the wings as well. The aircraft is flown, as you'll see, slightly differently now in the newer generation of aircraft. I used to fly the VC-10, and that was very much your control column and yoke that you'd expect to see, but these days it's more modern, it's all fly-by-wire. So what I do here doesn't go directly to the ailerons, the elevators or the flight controls, it goes through a computer. So I use a side stick here, almost like what you would see on an F-16 but in an airliner. The inputs I put into this control here and in the rudder pedals there, and indeed the thrust levers here which control the engines, all go through a computer and are sanitised for safety and give us a level of protection and a certain level of intelligence. If I tried, for whatever reason, let's say, to fly the aircraft upside down accidentally, or I roll too much, the aircraft, said it's 4th generation, it knows it doesn't want to do that. It will take over and not allow me to roll the aircraft upside down. If I pull too hard back on the stick and I was to, let's say I was in a VC-10, I could damage the structural integrity of the aircraft. But in a Voyager, the aircraft, no matter how hard I pull back on this stick, the aircraft will take over and reduce the pitch to a safe level and not let me do it.
And just talking about that refueling, when it comes to doing that, talk us through the process from the pilot's point of view.
Sure, yeah. So once we're there, our job is to run the formation and safely get together with our refueling partners, because it's not just parking on a forecourt with a car. The aircraft are moving, we're about 20,000 feet, doing about 6 miles a minute, roughly 6 to 7 miles a minute. The fighters might be coming in quicker depending on what they're doing. So the closing speeds are between 12 and 15 miles a minute. So I need to get an aircraft into that formation with a safe split. So if they miss us, or there's cloud and they can't see us, or it's night, it's safe. And then once they get visual contact with us, they can join on my wing. Once they're there, we can then get them in a position where we can get our refueling hoses out and give the fuel to them. So it's the same fuel on our aircraft. I can show you a display down here. We carry up to around about 110 tonnes of fuel on board the aircraft, roughly. That's the same fuel that burns through our engines that we're going to pass to the other aircraft. So we do that by pumping the fuel out at pressure. The fuel is increased in pressure by several refueling pumps, as well as our main engine pumps. But it essentially goes down the hoses at a pressure that's suitable for them. And when they're ready, they'll plug in behind the aircraft when we clear them in, make contact, literally plug their probe into our basket, and the fuel goes.
Okay, so talk us through the details of that refueling process, some of the gizmos you've got on board to help you do your job.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from the pilot, there's two sides to it. There's the pilot side and our mission system operator side. So from the pilot side, we can put the aircraft into an automatic situation to give us some capacity, so we can hold the altitude of the aircraft, we can hold the heading and the speed through our flight control unit up here. We've got a display up here which tells us where we are. I can put on a refueling track here. As you can see here, we've got Area 8, which is a refueling track in the North Sea. That could well be a refueling track over Iraq or somewhere else in the world. So I know where I'm going. To manage the system, we've also got an extra bit of equipment here. So most of your airliners would use this as the desk, if you like, and we can still use it as that, or we can have lunch, something we've got to do. Or when it's time to work, we can flip out the TV screen and link to what's going on behind us. And the mission system operator can give us a picture of the back of the aircraft. We can pan left and right to see the refueling hoses and what's going on there as well. We also have a link with a touchscreen display with a moving mouse, and we can bring a tactical display up where I can see exactly where I am, who's around me, friendly or foe. When I'm busy, I can pop that away at any time I like, and I can program the equipment to tell it how many receivers we've got in this box here, how much fuel I'm going to give away, and I can monitor how much fuel I have on board on this display here in every fuel tank. As I said, we carry about 110 tonnes of fuel, and I can see that right now I've got 3 tonnes of fuel in the fin, I've got 2.5 tonnes in the wingtip, I've got 10 tonnes in the centre tank, etc. How the fuel pumps are doing. All the systems on the aircraft that make it work, the hydraulic systems that augment the fuel pumps on board. I can see how the engines are doing, I can check the air conditioning, I can check the pressure in the tyres and temperature in the tyres. It really is modern, and it's got everything for me right there. But the rest of it happens behind in the mission system operator's console over there.
So Jerry, you are mission system operator on the Voyager, most important person on the plane, obviously.
Oh, well, we like to think so.
Talk us through your role.
Okay, the job of the mission system operator, or MSO as we normally call it, is to carry out the air-to-air refueling. The pilots get us to the area we want and to coordinate things, but once the receivers arrive, we look after them from the point of joining the aeroplane to receiving their fuel, and then immediately prior to departing them, doing whatever they want to do next. So we control the delivery of the fuel and the movement of the aeroplanes around the rear of the aircraft.
Obviously it's a highly regimented process. Just take us through it step by step. How does it work?
Well, initially we will have a plan at the beginning of the day of which aeroplanes to expect, and hopefully they'll appear at their allotted time and join the tanker on the left-hand wingtip, stacked up. There might be a queue depending on how busy they are, and once they're stable in that position, we will then call them to move behind one of the hoses. This aeroplane has 2, some of them have 3, so we can refuel a larger aircraft from a centerline hose which has a greater flow rate. So we move them behind the hose, and when they're stable, we clear them to make contact. We use that to one of the pods here, and we have a system of traffic lights that we can use if we don't want to speak on the radio for whatever reason to control the procedure. So in this case, I'll just select an aeroplane. I've got one here. We do that on our plan. If I put the lights on, we get a red light which will tell them not to make contact, or if they are in contact, to break contact.
The system is fairly new. I knew you've only been on board for doing this for a couple of months.
Yeah.
What was it like before this new system came in? How does your job compare?
It was very different. I was a flight engineer on the TriStar, which was one of the aeroplanes that the Voyager replaced. And as well as dispensing the fuel, the flight engineer would actually have to manage the entire fuel system as well as his other duties as being part of the flight crew. So he would have to make sure the fuel was in the right tanks. He'd selected the right pumps to send the fuel to the dispensing apparatus, and equally so we'd have to keep an eye on what was happening behind the aircraft with the receivers, but with a very archaic black and white camera that in the night time was virtually unusable. So the panoramic displays we've got here are a revelation, really.
So how quickly can you get pilots in, refueled and away?
Depends on the aircraft type, how good they are, and how much fuel they want to take, but typically it takes between 10 and 15 minutes to fill an airplane up. So.
That's pretty quick
Yeah,
job.
yeah.
But it does sound a little bit like a motorway forecourt, in that they queue on one side. When it's their turn, they come up, they take their fuel, they leave in a certain direction.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I was hoping it was going to be slightly more complicated than that.
Well, it is. In fact, if we're travelling at speeds of around 400 miles an hour, because that's relative, we're all travelling at 400 miles an hour, so it's quite interesting to watch the fighters come up very, very gently and get their probe into a basket that's about 45 centimetres in diameter. It's precision flying on their part.
Jerry, just talk us through how the cameras work.
Okay, well, we have an array of cameras that can used to show pretty much a full panoramic view at the rear of the aircraft. We have one on each side that look at the refueling position, so when the hoses trail, they're focused on the position that the receiver will be in. We also have one looking directly rearwards, and we can select the view to look around the aircraft and slew it one way or another. So, for instance, somebody might suspect they've got some damage. We can use this camera to look at it, and we can zoom in.
It's very responsive, isn't it? It pans pretty quickly.
It is, really. I'm still getting the hang of it. You can tell I'm not an Xbox player. So. But we can zoom in on something, perhaps on the receiver that they might have a concern about, and look at it and describe it to them so they can make a better judgment of what to do next.
Obviously, Jerry, you've got to be travelling at the same speed, so for the fast jets they've got to slow down to match your speed, but how does that work with an airframe like the Hercules?
Well, the Hercules, it's a bit more complicated because it flies considerably slower than we do, so they basically have to fly at as far close to their fastest speed as they can, and we have to come back to what is safe. We can fly as safely as possible at our slowest speed. Obviously we have safety tolerances within that, and so it can cause a bit of sort of head juggling at times.
So the Hercules is kind of running to catch up, essentially?
Pretty much, yeah. It's sort of the upper end of its speed limit, and we're coming back towards sort of the lower end of ours.
Well, that's it for part one. Coming up after the break, we find out what it takes to service the Voyager, and we take to the skies to refuel a squadron of Typhoons. Hello, welcome back to the Military Tech Show. I'm at RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire, and I've been given exclusive behind-the-scenes access to the RAF's multi-role tanker transport aircraft, the Voyager. Now, the Voyager may be completely state-of-the-art, but any aircraft that flies tens of thousands of miles a year is going to need to be maintained to the highest possible standards. Toby Sadler has been inside the hangar to meet the team of specialist engineers that keep it safe and reliable.
The RAF's new multi-role aircraft must meet the highest standards of safety and performance, and maintaining this complex machine is in the hands of Air Tankers' team of mechanical and electronics specialists. Civilian, reservist and RAF embedded engineers support and overhaul the aircraft so it's always operationally ready.
This is the Voyager hangar, and as you can see, it is huge. You can fit two of these A330s in here side by side with enough space for the engineers to completely strip them down if that's what's required. And all the work that goes on here is mission critical. Without it, the Voyager wouldn't be able to do those key tasks of air-to-air refueling and transportation.
Maintenance meets Civil Aviation Authority regulations, and all the engineers are trained to work on the A330.
Ready?
Every part of the plane is thoroughly examined, such as the hose and drogue refueling pod beneath its wing.
Okay, so what we've got here is we've got the drogue assembly and basket assembly, and like I said, this is the business end of it. And what we actually have, it's just a receptacle for the Fastjet's probe to plug into and start receiving fuel. The Fastjet will actually engage into this receptacle here, and these little rollers, they'll just they've got like a preset tension on them. They'll just make sure that the receptacle stays in there, and you can't come back out.
All right. So at night, I guess it's even more difficult. How does this help out the pilot?
Yeah. So at night we've got a row of little lights here.
Yeah.
You can't really see them that well, but at night time they do illuminate quite a lot. And they're powered by this little turbine here that just uses airflow that gets induced into here, spins it up, and that just lights it up. Once they've connected, there's a row of traffic lights up on the pod unit itself, and a certain sequence will start happening to tell them that they're ready to go. And then the Fastjet pilot will just push forward slightly, and the hose will retract in sort of 5 metres-ish, and then it'll go into a zone then that allows it to deliver fuel. And then from that point onwards, then the pod unit itself will just hunt backwards and forwards as the Fastjet slows down and speeds up, and make sure that this hose stays nice and taut and steady in the airflow.
And so why is it so important that we have that pipe, sort of tension on the pipe?
It's just purely because if you start getting any slack or ripples in this pipe, in the airflow, it can start getting exaggerated more and more, and ultimately it can end up snapping the probe off the Fastjet. And there's also fuel going to be spraying out and things like that. So.
And for you guys, in terms of looking after this piece of kit, what are you looking out for?
One of the main things we look at is that it is fully symmetrical. So as you spread it out like this, it's fully symmetrical, nice circle. All these interwebbings here are all intact because they can get broken sometimes when the probe just misses and pushes.
Because it
through.
won't fly straight if it's
no,
not
no, and also any tears or rips in this canvas sort of sheeting on the edge, and it is just a general condition thing. That's pretty much it.
What then happens when the pilot needs to pull away? They've got the tanks full.
It's literally as simple as the Fastjet just slows down, and once the preset tension on the rollers inside there, once that is exceeded, it'll just break away nicely. The Fastjet pilot goes and does whatever he needs to do, full of fuel.
Able to perform air-to-air refuelling while also carrying military personnel and freight, the Voyager uses cutting-edge technology to rewrite the rulebook. And powering the largest plane in the RAF's fleet are 2 Rolls-Royce Trent turbofans, each producing 72,000 pounds of thrust. The Voyager's safety is paramount and nothing is left to chance. Even a lowly spanner must be accounted for. Engineers have to sign out their tools, check for defects, calibrate them and return them at the end of the job. A spanner left behind in an engine could have catastrophic consequences.
At any given moment, there could be dozens of RAF aircraft in the skies. There could be Hercules transporting armoured vehicles to exercise in Germany, or tornadoes on operations over Iraq. And at any given moment, they could need to refuel in the air. And when that happens, it's the crew of the Voyager who take to the skies to fulfil one of their key roles, air-to-air refuelling. It's dawn at RAF Bryce Norton. In the briefing room, a Voyager crew from 10 and 101 squadrons are making final preparations for their mission. They've been tasked with refuelling Typhoon jets from RAF stations Coningsby and Lossiemouth.
It's all going to be working in Area 8. So receivers, it's a total of 9 Typhoons for the hour that we're on task. So call sign then, we're going to be Madras 5-1. The routing is standard for Area 8, so it'll be out through the corridor. Passports, visas, all standard. Timings then, so if we're working on an 8:25 takeoff, well it's taxi 8:15, start engines at 8Z, so pick up the checks 10:2. Cool. We're refuelling exclusively Typhoon aircraft. It's going to be down in Area 8, which is just off the Norfolk coast, yeah, we've only got an hour and we've got 9 aircraft, so it's going to be quite sort of busy initially. But yeah, absolutely.
With the brief over, the crew get on board. So we've been given our task for the day. We've had our briefing. We're off to the Norfolk coast to refuel Typhoon. So let's get on board the Voyager. Once there, the 2 pilots carry out final checks. For a mission like this, every detail counts and they must be fully prepared.
Check and break away.
The mission systems operator also completes his final preparations. With the checks finished, the Voyager takes off on its mission.
Okay, that's wings level, speed is 320 knots.
The Voyager soon reaches its mid-air rendezvous point for the refuelling, and on cue, the first of the Typhoons are just off our wing.
Clear contact left.
With fuel pods on both wings, the Typhoons will take turns to refuel on either side of the aircraft.
Track of 280, so can come left a bit just to keep us.
For the mission systems operator, this is a critical time. He must carefully choreograph each refueling stage. This is where the Voyager's HD cameras are vital for success. There's an extraordinary amount of technology on show here, but in moments like this, it comes down to old-fashioned piloting skills.
Rolling weather's on the left.
On the right.
The pilot has to carefully position his aircraft and connect the nozzle to the extended hose.
Just as it starts to bounce around.
Good news goes to 36 miles.
Go on, fella. Get in. 2 ponds in.
While refueling, the Voyager is able to dispense 80 litres of fuel a second, or 5,000 litres per minute. That's twice as fast as a Formula One pit stop.
What's your plan for 2-3?
If 2-1's finished well before, because I would think he's got probably a minute and a half on 2-2.
Yeah.
I'll bring 2-3 behind 2-2 and onto the right hose.
Okay, cool. And visual with gunfighter as well. Half 10. Just under that green layer. Oh yeah, visual.
Okay, okay.
It takes around 10 minutes to refuel a Typhoon. Once a Typhoon is refueled, it peels away and its place is taken by another one. While all this takes place, the crew of both aircraft talk to each other constantly. They must fly carefully, in parallel.
Both steady.
I'm guessing even though 2-1's going to be complete first, 2-2 will probably be done before you move. 2-3, is that what you were thinking? Couple of 3 to 1, you just turned.
Looks a little bit more stable.
With all 9 Typhoons refueled, the mission is complete. And the Voyager heads home to Bryce Norton. Well, there's no doubt that the Voyager is the ultimate in multitasking, air-to-air refueler and passenger transport. It should come as no surprise to learn then that it's going to play such a key role in Britain's air defence over the next 30 years. Thanks for watching the Military Tech Show. Bye for now.